One.
Well, hello, everybody. Good morning. It's the Bucket List. I'm Paul Collins. My co host, of course, is my wife, Nancy, but we have a very special guest today that we'll be introducing to you. She is our primary care physician, Dr. Jamie Durfey. But before we get to that officially, a reminder that you can go to my website, drpaulcollins.com, and you can get all kinds of interesting essays. And I say they're interesting because I wrote them. They were interesting to me at the time. I go back and reread them once in a while, and lo and behold, they're still relevant. Not they're not preachy. Doesn't have to do with that. There's just observations about things, situations, maybe some encouragement. You have to go and look for yourself. There's probably 15 or 20 or more on there that I've done, and I'll be writing more. drpaulcollins.com, drpaulcollins.com. And you can contact me through the website, and I will return your emails. I will answer them, and we'll carry on conversation by email. Well, I wanted to tell Dr. Durfey and Nancy and our studio audience here, Matthew Dylan Pearson, with his sidekick. You don't have Festus with you anymore, Matt. What are we gonna call this one?
This is Kevin Kilmurray. I don't know what we'll call
it. Okay, well
Kevin Festus.
Kevin Festus.
Okay, another Festus. Maybe Chester Festus. Matt Dillon had both those sidekicks. But I want to remind you guys that when we've had Dr. Durfey on before on the old Happy Hour show, we talked a lot about happy days. When I grew up, the best of times in the 50s, when I was in high school. Wow, what a time. We had, instead of Arnold's Drive-In, we had the Pig and Bun. And we had our Fonzie, and he grew up to become a Southern Baptist preacher of all things, Dr. Gerald Davidson. And we had our Richie Cunningham. That would have been me. Anyway, enough about that. I wanted Nancy and Dr. Durfey and our little studio audience here to know kind of what it's like a week in our life, and then we're going to talk about a week in the life of a primary care physician. Nancy and I, of course, do this on Mondays. We won't be doing it now in August and so forth, but we're doing this. And then Tuesday, we have an all-day meeting that has to do with how the work that we do in ministry, reaching out and touching lives, all day Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, we have a meeting with two people who are not only nationally known, but internationally known as singers, to help them put together a foundation to preserve their work and the legacy of their work. So that'll take a good part of Wednesday. On Thursday, we'll be back in another meeting, an all-day meeting, planning more outreach and ministry that along the lines of what we do. And then on Friday, we've been invited to the 30th year celebration anniversary of a camp for youth, and it's called Camp Bell, and we will be there during the evening hours for that. Plus, I have one clergyman who's wanting an appointment with me sometime this week to talk about some of his situation. And then daily, I process around 200 emails every day. And those emails are relevant to ministry. But Nancy and I have 4 business interests and an investment or so interest that I look after weekly via computer. So not too bad for a guy that's 45 years old. In my head, Kevin Kilmurray is over here observing. Kevin, back when I was 65, the Holy Spirit told me that I was, as 45, I was to think that way, act that way, live that way. Guess what? I'm stuck up here. I'm really stuck at 45. I can't get over it.
Thank you, Jesus.
Even though I'm 86. That doesn't register with me. I don't relate to 86. I'm 45. Oh. And my schedule seems to say that. So that's what's going on that. That's a kind of a semi-typical week for us. Now we want to talk about our Dr. Durfey. We are so honored and privileged to have her as our primary care physician and have had now for a number of years. And Dr. Durfey takes good care of us. I remember, I will always remember, Dr. Durfey, when I asked you about being able to cut back on some of my meds a little bit. Kevin, when I asked her about cutting back on some of my meds, she looked at me with that sweet, and she is beautiful behind that mask. Believe me, she is, as we would say back in the 50s, drop dead gorgeous.
Oh,
Anyway,
thank you.
she smiled and said, "They're keeping you alive, you know." And I said, "Enough said. That's okay. I'll take them." So, Dr. Durfee, I know for a fact that you hail from originally Maryville, Missouri.
Correct.
Maryville is up in the northwest corner of the state of Missouri. What's the population now? 11 or 12,000 something.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a university there. It used to be a college, now University, Northwest Missouri State University. But you didn't go there.
I did not.
Where did you go to college? I know, but I want the people to hear your voice.
I went to University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Medicine, combined degree program right out of high school. That includes a Bachelor of Liberal Arts and an MD.
Whoa, doggies.
Yay.
Mhm. You were in that accelerated program, were you not?
Yes.
That's because she's so smart.
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah,
boy,
I
I
can-
couldn't do that.
Yeah, imagine that. Your undergraduate work and your graduate work, your postgraduate work, all combined in 6 years. How grueling was that, or was it not grueling? How'd you feel about doing that in 6 years?
Well, it was, gosh, a couple of decades ago almost now. But so I remember it being pretty grueling. It was 20 hours a semester. Had to go in the summers as well. And it was go to class, and then it was study for another 3 to 6 hours afterward, and go to bed, get up, and do it all over again.
And that was year round, basically,
Basically,
for 6 years.
for 6 years, yeah.
And you were carrying 20 hours per semester.
Mm-hmm.
The average is like some will carry 15 hours, some will carry 12, you know, as little as 12. Well, some carry less than that, but usually they top them out at about 15 or 16 hours. When I was in graduate school, we were on a trimester system, and we really had to cram a lot of stuff in to get it done. And instead of 16 weeks, we had 11 weeks or something like that. I don't remember. Like you, it's been a decade or so ago. But in 6 years, your liberal arts training and then your medical school training.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I was attending postgraduate symposiums at medical schools many years ago, because of my psychology connection, I'd visit with the medical doctors in the hotel, and they talked about their liberal arts background. And some of them felt like they were shorted a little bit on liberal arts because they were so invested in science. Was that kind of the way with you, maybe?
Well, no, because I got my bachelor's in liberal arts. And so the first 2 years basically is when we complete the bachelor degree. And it was social sciences and humanities classes.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Well, that stood you in good stead.
Yes. So
Very much
I
so.
feel very fortunate to.
Oh,
have that.
yes. Because back then, those guys were just so, and they were all guys, by the way. I think there was one woman in the group, but they were so steeped in science, math and science, etc., that they didn't have time for language as well. They took a required language, but to get into medical school at that time. But they were very short on history, very short on anything that would speak of sociology, very short on language arts too. So anyway, that's enough of the old days. Let's update a little bit now. In medical school, what those of us who are on the outside looking in, the field of medicine is kind of a mystery to us. What did you study in medical school?
Well, the core courses, I would say early on, we did chemistry, biochemistry, to get the basics down. And then we did anatomy, physiology, pathology, with a lab. It was all one integrated course altogether. And then we did pharmacology to get medications down. I think that's all the basics. And then most of it was just on hands-on training in the hospital.
That's interesting. So the hands-on training in the hospital, was that given like as an hourly credit too? Were there certain credits for that? Or
I don't know if it was a credit system. At that point, we just called them rotations.
I see.
1 month we would go to intensive care. The next minute we would go to OB-GYN, inpatient.
That makes me warp backwards to the term practicing medicine.
Yes.
Because actually, in the old days, in the frontier days, someone would get with an older doctor and practice medicine. They learned on the job.
Mm-hmm.
So they've kept a little bit of that at the University of Missouri at Kansas City, obviously.
Oh, yes.
That with that approach. I wonder if other medical schools that are more on the traditional side, like University of Missouri at Columbia, if they're doing that too.
Oh, absolutely. Our clinic is a hub for the MU medical students. They come and spend
Oh, that's
a
right.
month with us.
Every once in a while, when I'm there as your patient, your nurse will come in and say, Dr. Durfey has a student today. Is it all right for the student to be in on your session? That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting to me. I go back to the times when we would call. I remember when we finally got a telephone that we called the doctor, and the doctor would come to our house with the black bag, make the house call, and I think he was probably well paid when he was given $1. But I was thinking about this morning, Nancy. Back then, there were men who worked for $1 a day, sometimes for 50 cents a day. So we considered our doctor as a celebrity and a wealthy celebrity. That's just the way we viewed them. And we were in awe of everything they knew. What they knew then would be a scratch on the tip of the iceberg, as to what you know now. But for that day, it was a lot of knowledge packed into those guys. But they would make that house call. And then later, when transportation became a little bit more available, we could go downtown to see the doctor. And we had, in a town of 12,000 people, we had 4 choices. And naturally, my folks chose a guy that was on the second story. You walked up a flight of wooden stairs and you went into a little room. It couldn't have been more than 8 by 8. And that was the waiting room. And then the door would open and old Doc Griffiths would open the door and say, come on in. And you walked into his office, which was maybe 10 by 10, room enough for an exam table, a roll-top desk, and a wooden chair with arms they could roll around. And he barely fit in that chair, and he smoked cigars. In fact,
Was he smoking cigars when he?
oh yeah, sure, oh yeah.
Oh, man.
And they had a portrait painted of another MD there in town that had built a hospital. Now, to us, it was big in those days. It wasn't really, but it looked big then because it was 2 stories and it was kind of spread out.
Did they have elevators?
No.
Oh, man. Then what in the cat hair do people do? They can't walk?
They carried them. And guess what?
Well,
the
who
rooms,
carried-
well, husky guys,
Well, did they have a husky guy waiting at the bottom of the stairs?
I guess. and not only that, but there were no restroom facilities at all.
Man, living, you don't eat, and you don't drink before you go to the doctor because there's no bathroom facilities.
Enough said. I mean, it was not the prettiest of, those were wonderful days, but they had their downside too, compared to today. But anyway, Dr. McCormick, he was almost everybody's idol. And he built that hospital. And he looked so distinguished in his three-piece suit and his hair getting gray, and he wore spectacles. And they had a portrait of him standing. I mean, they had an artist paint a portrait of him. It hung in the lobby, which I thought was huge. It was a small lobby of his hospital. And he's got a cigar in his hand between his fingers.
Did he die of lung cancer?
No, I don't know what he died of. He died because he got old, I guess. But anyway, that hospital, then his son took it over and made it a nonprofit and changed the name from McCormick Hospital to Community Hospital. And it's been long gone. So those are the memories that I had. And we were, my reason for asking some of the questions I'll be asking is because we didn't get a close-up look at the field of medicine at all. It remained a mystery to everybody. And so now to hear what you studied, the classes you had in medical school, I find it fascinating. I don't know about our viewers, but chemistry for me was tough. General chemistry, I got along pretty well. Qualitative analysis, I did okay. I skipped out on quantitative analysis. I knew what was coming. I skipped out on that. So how were you I'm going to ask you as personal, how were you as a student? I'm guessing you were good.
I was good. It was tough enough that I kind of waded through a little bit in my first couple of years as I was getting used to how much I had to study. So probably maybe a little better than average to start. And then I gradually improved. Not the top of the class, but probably definitely top 25%.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I was confident that you were good. Now, after your medical training, what comes next?
Then residency.
Residency. Okay. And where did you do your residency?
I did it here in Springfield at Cox Family Medicine Residency.
Huh. And would I know any of the doctors maybe that you worked with?
My partner currently, Stephanie Pendergrass, was one of my classmates, and Dr. Mimi Probst, who is part of our derm skincare clinic right now, was one of my classmates. I think the rest of them have moved out of the area.
And then how long is the residency? A year?
3 years.
2 years?
Three.
3? Whoa. I didn't realize that.
Yes.
That's lengthy. What about internship? Is that term still used?
So that's basically what the residency is.
Okay.
An internship.
So you, as an intern, you're in residency, and that's because you're going to, that's relative to being a primary care physician, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, what would have happened had you wanted to specialize in something?
I probably would have had to decide that before graduating medical school.
Really?
Yeah. Family medicine has a couple of branches of specialty, sports med, OB-GYN, and I think adolescent medicine. But if you want to do something like cardiology or gastroenterology, you would have had to have done an internal medicine residency, not a family medicine residency.
Oh, okay. So there is a difference between an internal medicine residency and primary care physician residency.
Well, internal medicine is still primary care, but
Okay.
difference between internal medicine and family medicine.
Okay. Oh, okay. Difference between internal medicine and family medicine. Now that clears up a little bit of questions that I would have had. For instance, I have a cardiologist that you work with, and he works with you, and back and forth, Dr. Stephen Kewen. And by the way, I'm sold on Dr. Kewen. He does a good job.
He's very good. Yes.
He takes care of me. And then the guy that did my pacemaker was recommended by Dr. Kewen, and his name's Dr. Garner, John Garner. Same name as one of the vice presidents that we had back under the one term of Franklin Roosevelt. Anyway, Garner knew that. I thought I would give him an education and tell him, but no, he knew it. But I tell people, I don't mind admitting that Dr. Kewen has placed 4 stents in my coronary arteries. I have 4 of them. And he recommended when my chambers of the heart weren't talking to each other real good, he recommended a pacemaker, and he recommended Dr. Garner. So I told Garner that Dr. Kewen had said that if he ever needed a pacemaker, that he would have Garner put it in. And Garner said, well, Dr. Kewen knows that if I ever need stents, he's going to put them in. So I would assume that if you ever need pacemaker stents, you know who to go to.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
By the way, I gave my pacemaker a name. I named it Buddy, and I call it my gizzard
Oh, okay.
because, every chicken ought to have a gizzard. So this is my gizzard, and I named it Buddy. All right, let's get back to this medical training thing then. After your residency, then how do you go? What's the mechanics of being put on staff as a regular physician?
Basically, you just research, what area of the country that you want to go into, what hospital. I mean, it's an open book basically, and then you go in for interviews with whomever you want to work with, and are hired or not.
So you during the course of the residencies, you get down toward the end of it, you start making a decision as to what department you basically would like to get into, and you wouldn't have to do that just because you did residency with the Cox Health Systems. You could have applied elsewhere, I guess.
Right. Correct.
But you chose to stay in the Cox system, and we're thankful that you did.
Yes.
But what are some of the other areas that a person coming out of residency could choose to interview for, say, in the Cox Health Systems?
So I actually had Dr. Roberto Menares, who's a inpatient hospitalist, actually was my classmate too in residency. So I don't know if you know him, but you could have worked as a hospitalist.
Okay.
Where you primarily just see hospital patients. I believe we could have gone into an internal medicine clinic or group. They just see adults, whereas family physicians see children as well. But if you just want to see adults, you could have joined an internal medicine. Within Cox, you could have joined the Farrell Duncan primary care group or the regional services group. You could have joined the residency program as a attending physician or as a teacher.
Interesting. The concept of hospitalists has come along in the last several years.
Yeah.
And
15 or 20
and I
or more.
and I was so, for one, right or wrong, I was glad when they came along, because I thought about primary care physicians. They have patients in the hospital. They're getting up in the middle of the night to get there, make rounds before going to the office to work. That's grueling. When hospitals came of age, we'll say, and became more sophisticated, it took a long time for them to finally see the need for an on-premises doctor specializing as a hospitalist to see patients on behalf of the doctor who sent them in. But I think it's a wonderful thing. When I was a patient in the hospital, I was always glad to see a hospitalist. Now, likewise, I guess emergency room physicians they make that decision when they're coming out of residency.
Yes. Well, it's ER is a separate residency.
Okay. So they kind of make that decision while they're still in medical school.
Correct.
And an emergency room physician, that's, I'm glad we have them. I mean, first time I had a heart attack, I was glad they had somebody on hand. My blood pressure was, what was it, Nancy?
Like 200 over something.
No, it was more than that. It was way over 200 something over something.
230
Yeah, way up there. It was
over
dangerous.
130 or
I
something.
would had the widowmaker heart attack. I kind of had, but she's not a widow. God intervened, but I was thankful for that emergency room physician and the people trained to work in an emergency room. Medicine today, folks, is not like it was when I was a kid, and I'm thankful that it's not. With every advancement in medicine, I'm thankful. With every sophisticated thing that comes along with all of their machines, I'm thankful. I worked one time as a marketing manager for a sheltered workshop. I'd go out and find jobs that big companies would send in for the handicapped to do. And the assistant manager of the workshop had a little business on the side. He and his wife sharpening surgical instruments.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that kind of business still exists or not, whether they just are all throwaway tools or not. I don't know whether they are or not, but there's a whole lot more involved with the medical profession than meets the eye, because behind it, there's a medical industry that involves machinery, that all the parts have to be manufactured. This is something that when you see your primary care physician, you need to keep in mind that if you follow the trail, it goes very deep into everything, not only in the United States, but globally. And those who want to just isolate the United States from anything global, you're making a big mistake, folks, because some of the finest surgical instruments could very well be made in Germany.
There you go.
See, so this is the lady who's at the tip of things, the one we see, who brings to bear on our lives all of that huge worldwide web of things medical. And I am thankful. I have a big picture about it, about how global medicine really is. And now with basically mass communication and instantaneously almost, and rapid transportation, the world is not as big as it used to be. The world has shrunk to a neighborhood. It really has. It's a neighborhood. So in our neighborhood, there's all kinds of things when you see your primary care physician that feed in to enable her to do her job and farm us out to others that do their things with their specialty. Now, another question for you to give us some insight into what you do. How many days a week do you report into the Medical Mile Clinic?
5 days a week.
5 days a week. And what time do you have to get up?
On Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I get up at 5 a.m.
Oh, my word. So, and when you get to the office, you get there at the clinic. You have an office in the clinic, I'm sure. What's about the first thing that you do when you walk? What you get in there like at 6 o'clock? In the good weather, you still ride your bicycle to the clinic? Okay, nothing like being in shape and awake when your patients come in. What time do you get there on a 5 o'clock morning?
Usually about 6:30.
Okay, and after you put your lab jacket on, what do you do?
The very first thing that I do usually is make tea.
Make tea?
Yes.
Now that caught me off guard, I must say. You didn't have coffee before you left home?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I did. But now it's transitioned to tea
Okay.
the rest of the day.
Okay, on tea.
Yeah.
Is it healthy tea?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you mind sharing with us overall picture? I don't want you to be in a position of specifically recommending anything, but what kinds of tea do you like to drink?
So on Monday, usually it's a jasmine green tea or a breakfast blend. And then Tuesdays, I have a Harney and Sons blend called Birthday Party, which is kind of a fruity tea. On Wednesday, I have mint tea mint green tea. Thursday, I usually have more birthday party tea. And then Friday, it's either Celestial Seasonings, red, I forget the name of it, but it's a hibiscus tea, or a strawberry macaron blend.
I have heard that tea is healthy.
For the most part, yeah, as long as you don't get too into the caffeine.
Okay, not, avoid too much caffeine. And I see some guys walking around, they've got a jug of coffee all the time. In fact, when I was a young pastor in St. Joseph, Missouri, we didn't have coffee pots like we have now. We had percolators. And I kept a percolator going on my desk. And I had two older ladies who would come in once a week to fold and stamp and address the newsletter, the church newsletter. And they would say, back then I was Reverend Collins. They'd say, Reverend Collins, you drink a lot of coffee. I said, yeah, I have a cast iron stomach. Guess what? I got over that because too much caffeine will even work on cast iron. Anyway, I find that interesting what you do. What do you do after your tea?
Well, on Mondays, I water my plants that are in my office just once a week. And then after that, I'll open up my laptop and get on my desktop.
Open up the laptop, check the desktop on your laptop, and you find out who you're going to be seeing. And you can bring up, if you're seeing me first thing in the morning, you bring up my records. They're right there.
Correct.
So when you walk into that exam room, you're already primed. You know what's going on with me before you get there.
She's done her homework.
Yes.
Now, what all in general is contained in that laptop? Because I see you walk in with it like this, you know. What all's in there? Like in my case.
Oh, for a patient chart. So all of your data as far as where you live and your phone number, your insurance information, your emergency contacts, all your vital signs for years and years back, all of your lab results, all of the notes from when you were in the hospital or with Dr. Kewen or with myself, everything. Anytime you ever
and
touch
all my
dogs.
medications.
All of your medications.
And all my vitamins if I take them.
Yes.
See there, you have my medical profile in detail.
Yes.
Really. Now, one of the things that Cox offers, and I don't know about others because we're part of the Cox system, but Cox offers that I really like is their website. And I can go in there and I can find a lot of my information in the patient portal. And that's how I communicate with you, is through that patient portal by email through the Cox system. And I find it very complete. Once in a while they tweak it and I have to learn to use it again, that sort of thing. But it's all right. Kevin, I pay attention to this because someday you'll be 45. I take holy pride. It's not unholy pride. Holy pride in this 45-year-old brain being able to handle two computers on my desk and get into these websites and mosey around and, they changed it. Okay. Not bad for a 45-year-old, right? Anyway, now then, when I know it used to be, it doesn't happen now, I'm sure, but it used to be doctors would be, primary care physician be called out on the emergency. Now that only happens primarily with, I guess, with some of the specialties like Dr. Kewen. I know I've had to wait in his office because there was an emergency. But do you get, as a primary care physician, do you get any emergency? Well, if it's an emergency, they usually come in your office. Do you ever get called out?
No, I don't ever get called out of the office.
No, that'd be that would be a referral. That'd be different. Let's see, what else was I going to ask you? I had something on my mind. This 45-year-old brain is like steel trap. It's a little rusty at times, just certain days.
Honey, that idea is just wandering around there in that steel trap.
Yeah.
You got to catch a hold of it.
Yeah, it's like watching those guys doing the trapping in Alaska and below zero weather and all this
Yeah.
snow.
Yeah.
Yeah, they set the trap and hope something comes along. Well, when we go back to some of the old days in medicine, when we had these doctors that we admired so much, uh, they're of necessity. Much of their lives were very private. Uh, the most, the one lacking in privacy that I remember, his father was the one who had the big portrait painted of him. His father was an MD. The son was a DO. And he built a very nice home across the street from the junior college that I attended before I went to the four-year college. And he loved that college. And he was the team physician for their junior college basketball team, which, by the way, won 4 national championships.
Mhm.
Twice they won them back to back. The Moberly Junior College Greyhounds. He was the team physician, and he had such a relationship with that college. He didn't have much of a private life, but I can understand why physicians today have a tendency to kind of lead a more protected life, because there's so many liabilities out there. You don't have to tell us the details on it, but there is such a thing as malpractice insurance, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Now, that is something I'm assuming is handled through the Cox Health systems, but there are no free lunches, so I'm sure it costs Dr. Durfey to be involved in other words, they're not providing you with free office space and free lab and free nursing help and all that. No, there is a cost with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of liabilities, you're not only, back in my day, it was a doctor was responsible for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're part of a community of doctors. You're part of it's more than a business, really. You almost have to look at it as your community in a sense, and you become responsible for each other in a real sense. Mm-hmm. With that in mind, about how many doctors are in the Cox system, approximately?
Oh, gosh.
I know Cox is the largest employer in this area.
Yeah.
By far. They're larger than the other major hospital system.
Mm-hmm.
So there must be hundreds of doctors to take care of.
It's hundreds. It's in the hundreds.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Isn't that awesome that they do have that many?
Oh, my, yeah.
It's not like in your day when there was only 1 or 2.
Yeah. Well, we had 4 to take care of 12,000 people, let alone people out in the county.
Yeah.
So.
So, Springfield's blessed.
Oh, my word. Yes, we're very blessed to have all this medical help. Nancy, what would you like to ask Dr. Durfey? Anything in particular?
Yeah. Thank you, Jesus.
Remember the microphone.
I had the thought of, when did you decide on medicine? Since you went into medicine, you might say right out of high school.
Mm-hmm. I would say probably my junior year was whenever I really decided I wanted to go to medical school and was starting to look at medical school.
Why did you even think about looking at it?
I just I had a lot of really good role models in my hometown as far as family physicians, and I was always really good at science and really enjoyed science classes.
I think you're blessed to know, even before graduating high school, that you knew what you wanted to do. I didn't.
Okay, now as a high school girl looking at medicine, I'm sure there were lots of things you couldn't envision that was down the path. Had you known that you'd be working barely having time to sleep for 6 years, would you still have done it?
Yes.
And you would do it again?
Yes.
Oh, see, now that's the kind of answers I want. I have to tell you now a story that will, I believe, inspire you big time. Nancy worked as a geriatrics nurse, as an LPN for 30 some years, same location.
Yeah.
And probably 30 years ago, there was a resident in that nursing home who was a woman in her 90s. She was ordained as an Assemblies of God minister, and she was a medical doctor. Now, 90 years old, add 30, that's 120.
Mhm.
When she went to medical school, it was like at least 140 years ago. Women going to medical school back then was almost unheard of, right?
Mhm.
Kevin, you like this too. She was a marvelous woman. Her name was Dr. Josephine Williams.
Yep.
And people loved Dr. Josephine Williams, Dr. Williams.
Mhm.
And nurses didn't mind sitting by her bedside.
Mhm.
Now, remember, she's in her 90s. She's a minister and she's a medical doctor.
Mhm.
And this was 30 years ago.
Probably
They
more.
went in to check on her one day, and it was not uncommon for her to be lying on her back, praying like this. And that's how they found her deceased,
Mhm.
Yeah.
lying on her back.
Mhm.
She went to sleep
Mhm.
praying,
Mhm.
and she went to heaven praying.
No, she didn't go to heaven because nobody checked on her. Believe me, they were checking on her.
But I think that's amazing. I know I had a good friend who's now deceased who shared the same last name as me, was no relation. Her husband was a lawyer, and she was a medical doctor. And when she went to medical school, now she'd be just about 90 years old now if she was alive. But when she went to medical school, University of Missouri at Columbia only had 2 years of medical school. And so she did 2 years there and then 2 years at Washington University in St. Louis. And she was the only female in her class for 4 years at all.
Mhm.
There's a whole lot of other stuff that we could talk about. Someday we'll have to get together when we can I'll tell you my experiences of watching some of these medical people going through things from years ago and the steps they took and how they got to where they are. Folks, you have had the privilege of gaining a little bit of an insight into the life of a wonderful young primary care physician, Dr. Jamie Durfey, MD, her training, and what her workday is like. There's a ton other questions I would ask, but we've run out of time. So until we ever see you again sometime, we want you to stay blessed, and we'll be seeing our doctor regularly because we're good patients and we believe in cooperating with our health care giver. So she's our partner and our friend, and we love her dearly. We think she loves us too. Y'all have a
Yes.
blessed day. See you. Bye-bye.